Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. We're going to talk about the 20 most common grammatical errors in English and talk a little bit about the use of definite articles in academic writing. So by the end of this workshop, hopefully you'll feel good about your proofreading skills, be able to apply these rules to your own writing, and to recognize the different uses of the definite article.
Thank you, Mary. So now I will get started with the Bedford St. Martin 20 most common errors. Number 1, missing a comma after an introductory element. So if you have an introductory clause at the beginning of your sentence, and that could be a prepositional phrase, it may just be an interjection, it may be it could be one word, but if it starts at the beginning of your sentence and it's a dependent clause, it needs to be offset with a comma. So if you look at the example below, before the movie starts, let's get some popcorn. So let's get some popcorn is the independent clause in that sentence, and you need to set the prepositional phrase before the movie starts off with a comma. So if you look at the second example, yes, you do need to purchase all the books in the series. You have to offset that, yes, the interjection before the full independent clause.
All right, another error, number 2, is vague pronoun reference. So we know that a pronoun is a part of speech that can replace a noun. So let's take a look at the example. After the teacher gave Susan the paper, she walked away angrily. In the second part of that sentence, we can see that the pronoun is she, but are we talking about Susan or are we talking about the teacher? It's not clear from that sentence. So sometimes it's better to have a short, simple sentence, or sometimes do a little bit of repetition for clarity.
Okay, thank you, Mary. So number 3, missing a comma in a compound sentence. This is a very common error in student writing. So this is something to be careful and really look carefully when you're editing your papers for these. And the most important thing is to watch for those fanboys, right? The coordinating conjunctions, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. If you are using a fanboy to create a compound sentence, you need to put the comma before the and. So adulthood has 3 stages, full sentence. Each stage has its particular challenge, is another full sentence, an independent clause. So to join them together with that coordinating conjunction and, I need a comma before the and, right? If you look at the 2 other sentences that we have there, you can see that both of the clauses on each side of the coordinating conjunction are full sentences. So therefore you need to put that comma there.
Another error that's very common is using the wrong word. One of the most common reasons for using the wrong word is that you're misusing a homonym. So to, and to are very common homonyms in English. We also have there, and there. We have for, and for, and there are dozens of these kinds of words in English. So be careful using spell check. Spell check does not always flag the words correctly. Another source of wrong words is often just using the wrong word form. So maybe using an adjective instead of an adverb in a sentence.
Okay. So number 5, missing a comma with a non-restrictive element. A non-restrictive element or a non-restrictive clause is something that is unnecessary to your sentence, right? You don't need it. If I removed it from the sentence would still be an independent clause. So if you look at the sentence, Jane, who loves to read, found the library. The non-restrictive clause in between the commas is who loves to read. I don't need that in there. It's just giving you more information about Jane. And it also, we use these sometimes as when we're writing because it's for sentence variety, right? So putting some clauses in the middle of your sentences breaks up the monotony of simple sentences or always using compound sentences, but it is a little bit tricky. So if you do not need that clause in the middle of your sentence, you must put it inside the commas.
All right. Number 6, wrong or missing verb ending. So if we look at the sample sentence there, the clue there is last week. Last week, a burglar robs 3 high-rise apartments. We know that since it happened last week, that should be robbed. So I think this is sometimes an error that's just overlooked. Not that students don't know the right answer or how to figure it out, it's just easy to miss that missing S or ES or ED. So if you know that sometimes you make verb errors, just maybe proofread and look for that specifically.
Okay. Number 7, wrong or missing preposition. Prepositions are tricky. This is something that a lot of students struggle with in their writing. So the rule is preposition, be selective. Pick a preposition that is showing what it is you're trying to say. So prepositions have 4 functions. They show time, direction, location, or relationship. So depending upon which of those you are trying to say, you need to pick a preposition that will correctly do that. So the example, the letter is in the mailbox. It's very different from the letter is on the mailbox, right? So depending upon what you want to do or what you're trying to say here, you need to choose the correct preposition. Relationship, I think, is a little bit more difficult to relate sometimes, right, to see. So an example of that would be, I received the letter from Mrs. Newbegin. So I got that letter. There's the connection between the two of us, the relationship. It was exchanged between us. So from Mrs. Newbegin, the preposition from is showing that relationship.
All right, rule number 8, comma splice. So going back to slide 3, where we looked at independent clauses, a comma splice, conversely, is when you join 2 independent clauses with a comma. You can't do that. So what's missing there? The conjunction. So if we look at the sample sentence, Paul loves to travel. He visits Europe at least once a year. We have an independent clause and an independent clause. What we could have done is put a period there. We could have used a semicolon, or we could have included that conjunction to smoothly connect those 2 independent clauses.
Number 9, missing or misplaced possessive apostrophe. This is something to look for when you are proofreading your papers, right? An apostrophe's primary job is to show possession. So if you are trying to show possession, you want to make sure that you have that apostrophe after the subject. So the students' essays were impressive. Singular student, you see the apostrophe goes before the S. If I'm trying to show plural students, the students' essays were impressive, I put the apostrophe after that S. So it's showing ownership of the essays, but you need to be careful. Are you talking about one person or are you talking about multiple students?
Okay, number 10 is unnecessary shift in tense. Verb tense expresses a sense of time in a sentence, paragraph, paper, or longer work. And so if you look at the example there, in 1835, Charles Darwin explored the Galapagos Islands, and in 1850, he writes Origin of the Species. So yeah, the verbs don't match. So not only is there an unnecessary shift in tense, those 2 parts of the sentence don't match, so they're not parallel. So it's just a kind of sloppy effect. So a solution to that would have been, he explored and he wrote.
Number 11, unnecessary shift in pronoun. So a pronoun shift is a grammatical mistake where the author starts the sentence or a section of the paper using one particular type of pronoun and then shifts to another. It can get confusing for the reader. So the example, the hikers were told that you had to stay on the trail. So at the beginning of that sentence, the hikers is plural, right? So they had to stay on the trail. So it gets very confusing if you are not coordinating your pronouns. According to recent studies, a juror may have their mind made up before the trial even begins. So a juror is a singular juror, may have his or her mind made up before the trial even begins.
Number 12, sentence fragment. So a sentence fragment is a part of a sentence. It's not a complete sentence. It can be represented in sentences with an incomplete thought, a missing verb, or a missing subject. So taking a canoe trip in Canada. Incomplete thought. What about it? I could have said taking a canoe trip in Canada, comma, Teresa dropped her paddle in the lake and there were snapping turtles, something like that. Then you would have the full idea that there was trouble. Was playing the part of Lady Macbeth. That's our third example there. There's a missing subject. Who's playing the part? So just being careful that when you have your sentence and you're trying to build a good sentence, you need a subject, a verb, and an object in order to have a complete sentence.
Wrong tense or verb form. So this is something that I think goes into the planning of your essay when you're writing. What tense are you writing in, right? The verb tense tells the reader when the action is taking place. So are you writing about something in the past, something that's presently happening, or something that will happen in the future? And you need to be consistent in your verb tenses throughout your essay because it can get very confusing for the reader. If you have an intentional reason, if you're making a rhetorical choice to switch purposefully, right? Because maybe you're talking about something that is happening or referring to something in another tense, then it is usually okay. But just be consistent with your verb tenses and make those switches with consideration to what you're trying to say and to whether or not it's going to be clear to the reader.
All right, lack of subject-verb agreement is number 14. So if we read the sample sentence, I'm going to just start right with the sample because I think that this says it all. The main source of income for Trinidad is oil and pitch. I've seen sentences that are similar to this, and the students might be inclined to choose are because you have oil and pitch. But looking and going back to the sentence, the subject of the sentence is the main source of income. So therefore, we would choose the singular verb.
Missing a comma in a series. So using commas to separate three or more words, phrases, or clauses in a series in a sentence. So a conjunction goes between the last two items in the series. While you may not see this in all writing, right? So you may not see it if you're reading something on the internet or if you're reading a newspaper or a magazine. It is required as part of APA and MLA. It is consistently used, I think, in academic writing. So if you look at the example, basketball, hockey, football, baseball, and soccer are popular spectator sports. So that Oxford comma is placed before the final and, before you go between baseball and soccer. Just offset it. So this is, again, it's a rule as part of APA and MLA. So you need to include that Oxford comma.
Number 16, lack of agreement between pronoun and antecedent. The newspaper featured tornadoes on its front page. So again, the antecedent is the newspaper, and we have the featured its tornadoes on its front page. So that is the clear choice. The pronoun must agree with the antecedent.
Okay, number 17. Before I mentioned a non-restrictive element, so now we're going to talk about commas with a restrictive element. So if you have a restrictive element, it means that those words are necessary to understand the full meaning of the sentence. You need that in there. So if it is a restrictive clause and it's necessary to understand what you're trying to say or so that the reader understands the full intent of the sentence, you do not use a comma. So the company rewards employees who work hard, right? If I was going to even shift that a little bit, I could say employees who work hard are rewarded, right? So even if I move that who work hard into the middle of my sentence, no comma, all right? Because not everybody is rewarded, only the ones who work hard.
All right, a fused sentence is also known as a run-on. It's instances where two parts of a sentence are sort of glommed together and stuck together, and the result of that is confusion. So in looking at the example, entrepreneurship is the study of small business. College students are embracing it enthusiastically. It's hard to tell where the first part of that sentence stops and the other part begins. So I've underlined business and college, and the way to remedy this, right? There's three remedies. We could either separate with a period, We could separate with a semicolon because these two ideas there's a relationship, or we could add that coordinating conjunction and the comma. So I could have said entrepreneurship is the study of small business, period. And then a capital C, college students, and continue on my way.
Okay, so misplaced or dangling modifiers. Let me start with a misplaced modifier. A misplaced modifier is a word or phrase that is separated from other words in the sentence, but if you don't put it in the right spot, it can change the meaning of the sentence. So I nearly earned $50. I nearly earned, it means that I didn't get any money, right? I won nothing, right? If I said I earned nearly $50, maybe I made about $45, $47, right? But I did walk away with some money. So moving that word nearly, that modifier, is going to change the meaning of my sentence. It's going to decide whether I got money or not, right? So the second is a dangling modifier. And a dangling modifier is usually at the end of a sentence, and it can make the sentence sound awkward, it can sound confusing, or sometimes it could just sound downright ridiculous. So if you look at the example, the police chased the dog in the squad car. The way this sentence is written, it looks like the police are running after a dog who is driving the police car, right? So you need to clarify, in the squad car, the police were chasing the dog, right? Or driving the squad car, the police were chasing the dog. So that way it's very clear of who is actually driving the car.
All right, final rule, number 20, it's confusion. So remembering that it's is a contraction for it is useful. And really, if you're writing for academic purposes, you want to avoid contractions anyway, so maybe that will be useful. But the sample sentence is, it's always a good idea to wear matching socks, or at least that's what I used to believe. And then in the second example, we have, although the peach was gigantic, its pit was rather small. In that second instance, we need the possessive form because the pit and the peach have a relationship. All right, indefinite articles. You want to get us started, Teresa?
Sure. So now we're going to shift to part 2 of this grammar video. So we're going to talk about articles and how they're used. So indefinite articles are articles that are referring to nothing specific, right? We're not talking to a specific item or thing. So if you look at it, is used before consonant sounds, and an is used before vowel sounds. It's used before vowels all the time, right? A, E, I, O, U, you use an, but it's also used before words that start with a vowel sound. So for example, if I said Prince Charles is an heir to the throne in England, right? The word heir, H-E-I-R, does not start with a vowel, but it does start with a vowel sound, that silent H. So you do need to use the indefinite article an, right? No article is necessary for the first mention of a plural or a non-count where none of these special conditions apply. So that's a little confusing. So if you look at the example, English is a language that has been influenced by other languages such as Latin, Greek, and French. We wouldn't say a English or an English, right? So we do not need to start or put in an article before the word English.
All right, definite articles. So all of the following are uses of the definite article. So if you're mentioning something in a sentence and then you're referring to it again, spread a thin layer of icing on the cupcake. The icing should be room temperature, not cold. It's clear in that context that we're talking about the icing that we're spreading. With superlatives, the first rule, specifiers, the main cause, shared knowledge, things that you and I both understand. The sun rises in the east, the sun sets in the west. Partitives, none of, some of, all of, most of. And then, of course, the names of theories or discoveries. And the example there is the Hubble telescope.
Mary,
Yeah.
I wanted to just point out, because I noticed it as you were speaking, if you look at your first example, right? The icing. Now we said on the slide before that you use a or an before the vowel sound. So here's where I think it does get a little tricky for students, right? The icing is we're talking about that specific thing, one specific thing, a definite article, right? We need the definite article there. So you have to be careful because there are anomalies, right? There are these little things that change. So it can get confusing, but
Yeah,
I
and
noticed that when you were speaking.
that's true. And I recently read that, we used to say an historical figure, but now we say a historical figure. So rules in English change. There are exceptions to rules. And I think that's a really excellent point. Languages in general change, and they change fast. Definite articles. So here we're talking about the categories, things that you can kind of keep in mind as this is a category. So we have indefinite articles, we have definite articles, we have count nouns, non-countable nouns, and the zero article. Why does this matter? Well, sometimes you practice grammar and it still doesn't make sense. Again, going back to those exceptions to the rules. Sand can be, it's generally a non-count noun. Things that are powdered or granular like sand or rice are generally not things we would count. But in some instances, we do count them. So for example, I could say, sand can run through my fingers. Or I could say the sand in the beach on Oahu, the sands are different than the sands in New Jersey. Want to talk about exceptions?
Sure. So one exception is when a proper name is used in the possessive form, no article is used. So if we are talking about maybe someone's theory or someone's book, right? So if you look at the example, Dijkstra's algorithm is an algorithm for finding the shortest path between 2 points. So because we're using his name possessively, we do not have to put an article before that. Okay. So if I was going to say Shakespeare's play, I wouldn't say the Shakespeare, but if I was going to say the play, right? But if I'm putting a possessive noun before it, no article is used.
All right, let's talk about specifics and generalizations. The water at the conference was very cold. So I'm talking about the water that was in probably the water cooler at the back of the room at the conference. But I prefer to drink water in general at room temperature. The house on Baker Street sold in record time. I'm talking about that specific house. But houses in general in suburbs right now are selling well during this COVID-19 pandemic. The market for homes is hot right now, but markets fluctuate. So I think you just have to take a step back and think about what you're saying and whether you're talking about that thing in a general sense or more specifically. And our references. And we've also provided some resources for you. And so I recommend the Purdue Online Writing Lab. We have iCape workshops available on our website. And Teresa recommends learnenglishfeelgood.com.
If you go to that website, there are specific grammar exercises. So if you log into Learn English Feel Good, you'll see at the top, there's a bar. If you select grammar, you'll see that everything that we discussed in this workshop, there are practice exercises there for you. It'll let you know what you got right and what was incorrect so that you can go back in and you can try and figure out what you were doing wrong and keep practicing these rules. And the more you do it, I think the more confident you're going to get with the grammar and punctuation.
Excellent point. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you.